vintage industrial drum sample pack. All based off the Kawai R53. So, like it's got that really nice kind of late 80s, early 90s wax Trexy sort of sound to it.
Man, I got to tell you, so I got this friend in Chicago. Welcome to the Art of Rock, by the way. We're just pre-streaming because we're going to start shortly. I got a friend who swears by the 100, the R100 Akai drum machine. That's Connor in Chicago, who's with one of the Glitch Mob crew. And the samples he plays me on that thing are amazing. Like they're really punchy, chunky, no messing around drums. I don't know, interesting.
I can't place the drum machine like in my mind's eye, but I did have. I mean, I know that the teal and pink buttons are really familiar. And
dude, it's all about the color of the buttons.
Yeah, that's how else are you going to remember thousands of drum machines? I had a Kawai K1, I think, for a little while, which we bought mostly as a stage MIDI controller, but also it had a couple of like really rock organ sounds in it that were like just sampled and mapped to the whole keyboard, not even split, and a couple of like strikes and things. But it had like a 4-layer quad stack kind of thing that you could do with the voices. Anyway,
what's the Kawai? And we're going to start any minute after we end talking about Kawai. They did a synth. And it was the
K1 was the one I had. It was a synth after
and that wasn't that the crazy, people are looking back at going, that thing was so amazingly advanced. Wasn't it the K1?
No, no way. This one was just samploid layers, like partials with a
K4, K5. What was it?
Probably further one. Mine, the one that I had was K1, and then probably subsequent numbers had more features. But
there's a bunch of menu diving, but it was really fucking amazing synth. Anyway, there you go. The Life of Synths, which is actually a podcast, which is amazing. Welcome to the Art of Rock. It's the 14th, October 14th, and we're going to take all the madness in the world today and we're going to somehow turn it into art. First and foremost, I would like to acknowledge the Tongva people as the traditional landowners of Los Angeles. Traditional landowners is becoming a thing. And it should be a thing in America. I think when the Plains land, they should say, we would like to acknowledge. That's what they do in Australia. They say, we want to thank the Eora people of Sydney. Come on, America, lead the world. YT is not full screen. I don't know what that means, Rob. Join us every Saturday here. This is Art of Rock, and I think every Saturday we're doing it. This time, join us on the Twitch, unless you're on YouTube right now, which Rob is, and there's some sort of issue going on YouTube. I just can't deal with it. Rob, go onto Twitch. It's cooler and hipper, and it's one evil company for another. I'm sorry, my heart is so broken today. This is made possible with ANGELSPIT'S Patreon, who people do not break my heart and inspire me and keep me going, even though Ivan's chair is empty right now. Vince just released the new single and it's bloody excellent, by the way. ANGELSPIT'S Patreon, jump on, join it. It keeps me going. The eclipse has started, thanks Rob. And ANGELSPIT'S new album is on BANDCAMP. And it's pretty fucking rough, and it's called The Bastard Gods, and I'm very proud of it. And I've got the blaster beam back out. Can hardly hear that. I've been fucking with it all week. Oh, it's inspiring me as it jingles away. The Industrial Incisions playlist is something I want you to follow. It's on Spotify. Alistair, welcome. It's on Spotify. And there's a whole bunch of industrial bands that you need to know about. New ones from here. Vince just added, DJ Underminer just added his new track. Here's Jess. Damn, Jess, long time. And there's a whole bunch of classic old industrial tracks on there as well. And if you'd like to VTV, and after this, we are going to raid to VTV, and it's going to be amazing. My internet connection is unstable. Thanks, internet connection. So welcome to the Art of Rock, and it's just 5 shades of amazingness. Okay, we're talking about distortion and how. Thanks, Rob. Distortion is really fun. And it's such a fascinating tool because it's not just about distortion. There's so many different types of distortion. It's how, because Mark, who's amazing, just sent me his Rhythm Wolf because he hates it. And the whole world hates the Rhythm Wolf. But I really like it. And I was explaining to everybody before, it's so simple. Like, it's the sort of thing that you can sit down and just like jam out, come up with a beat. It's got CV gate. It's got, trig, so you can run it from your modular. It's got USB. It's got MIDI. It's got everything that a growing boy needs, or growing girl, or growing person. And it's so easy to operate, and the swing is awesome. It's got that Akai swing to it. And it's also got a really simple rudimentary kind of velocity thing going on where you can very basically assign velocity to each note. Super simple. But what's great about it is that when you start bringing up the howl knob, the distortion's a bit messy. It would be nice if it was pre-EQ'd, but hey, cost. I'm going to run it through an EQ and then distort it. Then run it into, I was thinking I'll put it through a wave shaper. The wonderful thing about distortion is that when you put different volumes into the distortion, things are going to distort differently. And if you're working with the synth that, for example, you could do something like the harder you hit the key, the more bass is in there. So when you hit it softly, it sucks the subs out of it. Or vice versa, where the harder you hit it, the more open it is, the softer you hit it, the more the low pass filter kicks in. You start creating wonderful, wonderful gurgling sounds that aren't just about distortion, but they become about like this wonderful bubbling fucking thing. Just welcome. Okay, I'm going to throw the floor open. Talk to me, Razzie. Talk to me about your amazing distortion experience.
The two things that came to mind are this sort of period of anti-distortion that came up and what that led to. Like, certainly 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s rock music was all about clipping distortion and distorting distortion and putting things in the same room into the same microphone distortion and tape saturation. But by the mid 70s, we're in that sort of like, there's air around everything and nothing clips and nothing is really like audibly dynamic distorted, and it was a good time. And then like suddenly we got all this unlimited cleanliness headroom, down into the noise floor in the 80s with some of the digital recording, and that SSL sound came out, and we ended up with, sort of that absolutely pristine, nothing is clipped, nothing has any rock distortion on it except for the guitar through its amp, and even then, like, let's say, I think Perfect Way by Scritti Politti comes up sometimes as like this cleanliness benchmark where things are certainly compressed, but the type of grit distortion was just absent. And once samplers got clean and 80s recording got clean and everybody was doing SSL stuff, all we were left with was compressors on the channels. And like, that is the sort of period, late 70s to the mid 80s, up to the late 80s, where just this experience of absolute fidelity of the recordings was like, people were fetishizing it, they were going crazy for it. And then Al Jorgensen dropped acid and turned up the volume on everything on every channel on his console, and we went from With Sympathy to Twitch, and things started getting gritty again.
Thanks,
so
Al.
I don't have anything specific to talk about after that point yet. I'm thinking about it, but I like the way that we reached a point where distortion just was like, we conquered it. We didn't have distortion anymore, and then compression started coming in as our form of sculpting sounds rather than clipping. So
that's fascinating, because I've never really thought before. So I'll just rant quickly, Ivan, I see your hand. I've never really thought about that before, that everything got so clean and sterile because it could. And it's funny, I have that Scritti Politti album like Psych 85.
Yeah.
Oh my God. It's one of my favorite albums, man. I love that
I know.
album. And it's really the way you said that. Yeah, I know. That was kind of like we were hugging. We just had a reassuring group hug just then over Psych. It's really, man, that whole album inspired Black Dog Bite. It's so good. And the fascinating thing about the cleanliness of that album is you can hear all the parts. And the complication in that album, people diss that album all the time. They diss Scritti Politti. And it's that the songwriting's great. The lyrics are great. I love his voice. The production is ridiculous. And the composition is so good. But yeah, it's so clear that you can hear it bouncing between that bass, the flick of the guitar, and the DX7 and the synclavier. It's all like bouncing around. It's so clear. And it says to you, it's an 80s movie and everything. I learned a lot that summer, but most importantly, everything was going to be okay, which you've got to learn from every 80s movie. Ivan, rescue me now.
Speaking of 80s, Moonlighting has suddenly become available on Hulu. And the soundtrack for that show, like the first episode, the pilot, sounds so 1985. It's not even funny. Like, it is bleep and bloop. But it's glorious for it. Also, yeah, if Distortion, I think that became a, we're getting rid of that because we can now. And, you know, like the cost to record that cleanly in the early mid 80s, like the cost, just, it became very inexpensive to get there. And so, you know, shiny new thing, why not use it? And then speaking of shiny new things, everybody say hi to Jess.
Hi,
She's
Jess.
a Milwaukee musician. She played an amazing show on Tuesday with the smallest, like most stripped rig on the planet. So, you know, thought she'd be a great addition to
Absolutely welcome.
us.
And
Talking
just
our heads off at each other.
either wave your hand or put your hand up when you, and your input is so absolutely welcome. So yeah, just if you want to jump in, hey, do you want to jump in? I think your mic's currently muted. You're welcome to jump in, and we're talking about distortion. No luck. I can I do that? Can I ask you to unmute?
Testing.
Hi, welcome.
Oh, hello.
Good to meet
Forgive
you.
me, I'm a little under the weather, so bear with me.
That's all right. It's only 11 o'clock there.
Yes. What
Thing
time is it
going
by
around
you?
here.
It's 9 a.m. in happy LA time, and on the East Coast, it's 12:15.
So we're all across the board this morning.
Yes, and where's bloody? We don't have Alex from Berlin right now, but he'll be here soon. Just tell me about Distortion. I want to hear about it. Go.
Distortion. That's the topic today, huh?
Yeah, we'll groove around.
Sure. So I'm learning to use little bits of distortion. I guess what I can add is I'm playing with some pedals and such. I do keyboard, and I'm trying to plug in my pedals to my keyboard and add some elements. So you gentlemen probably know a lot more about different effects than I do. I'm a fairly new musician. I've only been playing with my synth for about 3 years. So this is very new territory to me, but I love learning. I do know a lot of music out there, and I love learning and hearing from all of you because I'm able to hone in on that and kind of take something and apply it to my own. So how did we get on the topic of distortion this morning, if I can ask?
I think it came from the Akai rhythm wolf, from Carl's experience with how that was treating his sounds.
Yes. So yeah, this is. I just want from the Akai and the way that different volumes going into different elements feeding into distortion. Distortion always throws something interesting back. Here's some interesting things about pedals and such, is that you're going to have to, with a keyboard, most likely, depending on brands and age and everything else, you're going to have to turn the volumes down. Because distortions a lot of pedals and stuff are looking for about -20, -30 decibels. And a lot of keyboards are -10, -0 decibels. So going into it, you're overloading there's too much volume, too much stuff going into it. That's the fun about it. There are some modern pedals that have got line level inputs. There are also some that have modular level inputs, which are fantastic. But the guitar pedals, which I love, I'm a big Boss fan. Those cheap little lollies, they look like candies. I love them. And you can get them for 20 to 50 bucks, and they do the job. And it's great. Like the DS1, it's one of my favorite distortion pedals ever. It's really, it's right in there, right in that upper range. It doesn't have a lot of bass to it. But if you want to get bass, they have a specific overdrive pedal for bass, because sometimes you don't want distortion in the bass. Distortion in the bass messes stuff up. Excuse me, scratching my face. You know, I was thinking, Resi,
Yeah,
I see
you want
your hand.
distortion in bass. This would be the one.
Fantastic, thank you. Bass Master. Oh, that sure is.
This is a great pedal.
That's a great pedal. I use the Boss bass overdrive pedal, and they're super cheap. They're like 50 bucks. And they're great because you can wind between. It's got a little EQ session, and you can also wind between the distortion and also the dry signal, which is really, really handy. So I was gonna ask, but it's crap. What I'm asking is the more distortion, you know, how distortion left in like the mid 80s, does that have something to do with the decency of society? Because it was the bands that had distortion that were dragged up in front of Congress. You know, Frank Zappa and fucking Dwayne Twisted. Oh, this is terrible. I forgot his name. Oh no, I just lost. Thank you, man, Mr. Schneider.
That's
I just
okay.
lost. So you said that again, Razzie, like you were hugging me, holding me, patting me on the back, and saying everything's going to be okay. It's a scritty politti kind of day. You know, I learned a lot that summer, but the most important thing was everything will be okay. Razzie, tell me about what's on your mind.
I like your line of thinking there about culture versus distortion, because certainly the bad people with the rock guitars and the distorted screaming, I mean, it sounds like pain. It sounds like distress calls. It's the sound of terrible things happening from far away that you need to know about and be alerted to. So with that in mind, yeah, you're onto something there, because the squeaky clean good guys with the synthesizers and suits and ties were, you know, having less distortion. I think we'll probably have to start a paper on that, publish something soon. But my sort of angle that was coming to mind in that is like guitar distortion is kind of the refinement area, and you can't get from the development of technologies that made distortion, clipping distortion, overdrive without talking about guitar. And the three things that were like kind of pivotal in my experience on that were the tube overdrive circuit, like a 12AX7 tube driven to sound a certain way, is like a classic sound. And I used, I've referenced this before, I have a single rack space, 2-channel, a couple of 12AX7s in a rack, PV Rockmaster guitar distortion thing that I use in an effects loop for a lot of stuff. And I have a MXR distortion too, which is a diode, like a solid state distortion, which both of these somehow, the way the circuitry works, gives you a touch. You know, it gives you this like gradual and controllable feel as you're playing with sort of a nuance, and you can use it as part of your expression in the thing if you don't just crank it. And Carl, you mentioned not hitting things too hard. That's like essential, where if you've got the range, this is like a total Eddie Van Halen kind of thing, turning your knob, or even certainly a Hendrix kind of thing, where your lowest velocities when you're striking it not too hard aren't really screaming. But if you lay into it a bit, you've got that just cross the threshold and you can make it sing and do some stuff. It's a really, it's an interesting part of your vocabulary is when you're playing guitar. And I think synthesizers don't lend themselves nearly as much to doing that. But on that front, even though I've got the distortion wired through the effects loop so I can do it on my virtual synths all the time, Craig Anderton had this 4-channel distortion thing. It was like quad distortion, and it was one of the first VSTs. And so you have 4 band splits, 4 separate, clean, separated if you want.
Quadrifuzz.
Quadrifuzz, there you go. Thank you. And that on any synthesizer, you'd have the sort of control to shape it and give it some of that kind of nuance and touch and response that you were getting inherently with the guitar distortion. So cool. And putting that thing on drum loops was like, oh, okay, we've arrived. Like, this is how you do it. All on one computer, recallable, totally cool.
It's funny. Funny as in haha. Rob, by the way, is talking about distortion, bit crushing, and radio sound. Thanks, Rob. It's funny that Quadrifuzz, which is from like 2000s or something, early 2000s, or it was on Cubase 3. And I still have that plugin. I still use that plugin, and I do not use the updated version. It's just like, nah. Yeah, I have a feeling I know where this conversation is going to go, and I'm totally okay with that. Without actually saying where the conversation is going to go, because I forgot. But what I do know is that when you look at this in a weird way, it says Art of Frock. This is really interesting because it's, man, there's just distortion kind of chews the sound up, and what it does, and like the thing I love about it, especially on drums, is like the new album. When Dave sent me his drums, his real rock and roll drums, I sent them through. The snare went through the DS1 pedal. The tom went through that one. It like everything went through something. Like it went through a pedal, and it instantly became fucking awesome sound. And what was great as well is that because I didn't gate it too hard, so therefore there was a lot of background signal, because that's what's magic about when you mic up a drum kit, is that everything is leaking into the mics and you're ending up with this massive sound. That's why mic drums sound massive, because the drums, the mics are whatever. But when you distort that, like it was the ultimate snare, bam, 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 and the toms, man, they wailed. They really wailed. But yeah, when you put a drum machine through it, and like if you're hitting a hi-hat and a snare at the same time, they will mix together, distort, and create something new. Same with when it's a kick drum and a snare or something. The frequencies, the distortion doesn't go, oh look, kick and snare. It goes set of frequencies. How can I ruin this? And that's what's brilliant about that stuff. That's why if you can, set the velocities to change the either the high pass filter or the low pass filter, and you're going to get some very lovely things. And the Ewoks shall dance, because they learned a lot that summer, and the most important thing was everything was going to be okay. Ivan, go.
Yeah, I think the thing that I've learned the most about distortion, especially over the last couple of months, is
that everything's going to be okay.
Everything's going to be okay, but like you do need to treat yourself okay along the way, because like, if you want to eat up headroom, distortion will just drain your headroom. So you need to get picky about using a EQ on that to.
So can I ask you, do you pre-EQ the distortion? Resi, I'm going to ask you this next, or do you post-EQ, or do you both?
Lately, I've been doing post.
Okay. That's interesting, because one thing, I've got a really crappy band EQ. Like, I think I got it for free on the side of the road. And I'll put a drum and vocoders, everything that's going to get affected heavily by something heavy goes through that. I am always pulling out everything under 80. I put a big hole at 400 and usually a hole at about 2000. And then you distort that. And you can actually hear all of this other stuff. I'm going to let you finish. I'm sorry, I just totally interrupted you. And then
actually, like the value of that, I need to give it a try because, like, I don't have to worry about finding an EQ on the side of the road. I've got Ableton, so I can throw EQ8 on every channel I want as much as I need, and just move it around as required. I don't have to worry about getting up and rewiring anything, which is also good. But yeah, no, I need to try that because, like, I'm building Ableton drum kits with these drum samples that I found, and like, rapidly heading towards maybe these become like my just standard drum kit set. And so it's going to be all pre-EQ'd anyways because it's just part of the Ableton drum kit. So it's always ready to just go as is, which will be nice. And I can do the EQing all the way down as far as, per pad, which is also good.
Ivan, always share the snare. If it's a good snare, share it. I'm actually going to try and find if I can find this. FYI, on the did I walk over you just then?
Mm-mm.
I'm such a bastard.
Actually, I do think I have a snare that I can share, which would be one of the ones that I made from fireworks this last summer.
Yes, share that snare. Imitates war drum stems. No, okay. Because with the Angel Spit, I'm trying to find them. Trying to find them. With the Angel Spit, do I have it? Kind of. With the album that I just put out on the USB, it came with the sample library. And all the samples are basically either I got them or I didn't put in the Emacs samples though. There you go. Oh, my computer now hates me. Yeah, they're all basically everything that got used. And they're all cleared to be used and da. But there's some, wow, it just keeps going on into, there it is, the KR, no, that's the KR55. These are online somewhere. I've got my drum loops online somewhere, but I'm going to share that during this. Ivan, was there anything else you wanted to say, or do I throw this to the great Resonator?
Great Resonator.
Resi, share us with your wisdom, baby.
You asked a trick question, Carl. There's no track that has ever been released without post EQ. There's no individual track that hasn't been EQ'd after the distortion. It's just never been done. We have no evidence that it's ever happened.
That's true.
So the question is,
that,
do you also pre-EQ?
Well, yeah, no, that's what I was asking is, do you pre-EQ as well?
Yeah, I started doing it, and again, I'm talking a lot of guitar this week, but getting into the front end of the amp, like, things are kind of, it's not like plugging into a Fender Twin where you just know what it does every time, or a Marshall, JCM, like you know what to expect. Plugging into an audio interface, the impedance matching and levels and stuff are going to vary because you've got a knob, and so I found myself actually EQing as the very first thing, like with either a low shelf with 12 dB, 15 dB, like a lot down in the sub audio 20-ish with a gentle curve before the distortion and tone shaping and stuff. And we're talking, it's going into an amp simulator or something next, but that amp sim doesn't happen to have its own little pre-shaping. I've been doing it a lot, and it's to get a specific response out of the rest of the chain, like to cut off some of the stuff that just isn't helping get that touch, get that the thing to speak the way that you want it to, as if it was plugged into a hardware amp. So yeah, pre-EQ, before the distortion, you can do a lot. It makes a huge difference.
Okay, I got a question. I'm just going through my drum samples. It's all about that damn snare. Like, why do I keep going back to the Lindrum, the SP12 or SP1200 or Drumulator? Why?
Oh, they sound really good. Prince used the hell out of them, and we were born into that. How are you going to not have that in your bones?
So is it and these are better than I think a 909 snare. Like 909s are great.
I mean, this is totally different. Totally.
Yeah. But it's really interesting that I will always go back to that. The snare sounds like it's breaking your jaw. It is punching you in the face and it's going and why go ahead.
I wanted to talk about that a little bit, but I thought I was jumping ahead a little bit. But right now on trend, clip distortion, like clipping limiters at the end of your mastering chain for your entire mix. I didn't think we were quite up to distortion on your entire mix yet, but those three samplers are, by the nature of the limited dynamic range of their sampling technology and their playback technology and the storage limitations, are heavily compressed. Like the dynamics are gone in that thing. So you get that effect of it being either really loud and close or, whatever, extremely large and far away, whichever, of those psychological effects happens. And those snares just do that. It's like an unnaturally iconic example of something that didn't exist in the world before that particular sound, and it's so tied into the technology limitations that we got a whole generation of that being like sort of a high point for killer snare, the cannon shot, the gut punch. I don't know if that answers why, but I think there's a lot of learned and shared, among us kind of.
This is something interesting that I remember was happening in the early 90s, is that like when it first happened, when rave first happened, and when like sampling first happened, everyone was sampling drum machine, whatever. Then somebody would hear that sample on their album, grab it, compress it, EQ, sample it, grab it, compress it, EQ it. So we were ending up with this hybridized snare. Like early mid 90s, it was this extremely compressed, almost just burst of noise. And it's interesting that when you go back to, and all of these samples that I use on the Emax, like I sample all the old drum machines on the Emax 12, arguably 8-bit, 16K, because that's what they are. They cut through the mix. If you're going to sample these guys, they've got to be a low sample rate. And they cut through the mix because that's how nature intended it. But it's just so weird that like you hear that snare and it's so clear. And it's funny, man. The snare really, it's the hunt for the snare and the kick. And this is another interesting thing, is that SB12 / Drumulator kick. Same with the once again, same with the Lindrum. It's so iconic, and it's so still. It's so solid. Like it's so solid. Yeah, sure. You can listen back to it, and it is lacking the subs of an 808 or whatever. But my God, it's a good snare. I'm sorry, I'm kind of being a dick right now. Rezi, talk to me.
There's a little bit of a precedent for that snare in the Wall of Sound Motown kind of thing, where they were like, maybe they were miking down the hall with the snare drum, but there was like a really like tube sound that they were getting on some, I don't know, I can't place it which one, but there was an evolving thing, like a little precedent for how we got there, We lost the thread certainly by the 70s, where a snare was a little thing that went, dry room, FM drum booth, no ambience, tea towels on everything, playing the Beatles, I don't know. But it was there. It was beginning, that explosive sound, you know, with like some kind of distant ambience being a married to the snare hit, you know, not just an effect that you felt, but actually like sounded like it was part of the attack decay snare drum. And that just blossoms in a single recording of the thing with the 8-bit, you know, low sample rate effect.
I wanted to throw this in as well. Thank you. About a really fun thing to do with if you've got reverb, because reverb and distortion just equals lush. And the more you drive it, the more lush it becomes. Throw your reverb before the distortion and let the distortion distort the reverb. And it's a wonderful thing. It's a really, because often reverb is EQ'd that the longer it goes, the more it sucks out lows or highs or something. It just kind of like dissipates. But when the distortion is jumping on that, you can hear it just slither out the harmonics. It's the most lovely thing. Distortion. Yes. But I will say analog drum machines distort way better than digital. That's what I think anyway. I could be wrong. I don't know why that is. Yeah. Does anybody else want to throw in about distortion or drum machines?
Or snares.
Oh, we could talk about snares.
Even now at, my advanced age, like.
You're only 22 though, Ivan.
Yeah, well, or 12. I mean, depends on
you're only 12 though, Ivan.
Yeah. But the, I often find myself chasing after that sound that the snares that we used in music class back when I was in like 7th grade. I chased that sound because they were just like rough perfection, super freaking snare. You could hear the air moving out of it when you hit it, and all of that stuff. And here's a big part of the problem though, is my not 7th grade ears don't hear most of the frequencies that really matter, or that mattered then, that made it sound so good then. But my brain can replay that, no problem. So I may have run across a sample that sounds exactly like it, but I may not have recognized it because I can't anymore.
That's fascinating. See, this is a really interesting thing as well, is the idea of, okay, let's bring some organics into the tracks, and let's build a snare drum, which might be a salad bowl full of nuts and bolts. And you're going to whack it with a mallet or a pencil or a ruler or something. So it's going to shake a little bit. You're not going to sample this. You're going to play it live. And you might play it for 7 bars. And it's 7, so you can loop it and it never falls back on itself or something. I don't know, 7 beats. You know what I mean? Same with the hi-hats. Who was I listening to? I was trying to pick that. Oh, Fade to Grey. Fade to Grey is a great track because the snare, I was listening to this song going, what the fuck is that snare drum? Because it was 1980 nothing, late 70s. I don't know when was Fade. And I was trying to pick what drum machine is that? Because everything else sounded very CR78.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, it's a real snare. And then I heard it's a real fucking snare. He cheated. He got a real guy, an actual human being, yes, to play drums over the CR78. And it's great. And I was thinking, and that's another thing Gabriel did, is that in like Red Rain, he's got, of course, we're going to talk about Stuart fucking Copeland. He had the Lin drum, just really simple, a tut ticka tut ticka or something, really simple drum pattern, and then he got Stuart Copeland to dance over the top of it, just playing hi-hats. Brilliant. It's so good. So I'm not only are we doing the horror soundtrack challenge, but I'm also doing I'm also issuing build a snare drum and put it in the mix, and it can be quiet, can be way back there. Same with your hi-hats. Make shit come alive and get an egg. It's all about the egg. You know, the egg? Little shaky egg thing. Yeah, you got to have an egg. Oh, I keep saying that. I'm going to have an egg in my next track.
I was thinking food the minute you said that. For
well,
obvious
I could go an egg right now. But you got to have I've got an egg there. It's a little green one. It's funny that when I no more cowbell, Rob. When I was in university, one of my friends took me to a music shop, and I was introduced to the egg because it was only this cool thing that had just come out, and he was listening to each of them and going, "Oh, I like the sound of that one," and I didn't know if he was joking or not. As it turns out, he was joking, but now yeah, that's funny. I know. They sound different. This one's got rice in it. This one's got sand in it. They sound different. There you go. I think I'm more of a rice, maybe a bit of both. Gee, I don't know.
I don't know which one I have, but there's a thing you can do where whatever's in it really clusters together and it hits the smaller end really hard.
Yeah.
So you can get two different sounds out of it.
Bam!
Very distinct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Piled in at once, and you get to pick out some snap rather than a slow build.
Yeah. Egg on everything, man.
Can I
go ahead? Shoot. Yes.
A little question here. Do we collectively have any experience with adding clippers at the end of our mastering chain instead of limiters? Clipper being essentially a really fast limiter with no attack time and no release time. But it seems to be really trendy right now in the popular pop electronic stuff, like EDM results.
Okay.
People who listened to EDM 10 years ago and not making music now. Maybe there's no consensus, but it seems to be a thing.
I don't have a lot of experience with this, but this is a very interesting subject. Jess and Ivan, I would love to hear from you guys.
Is it working is the first question I've got.
I've played with it as a last, instead of the limiter, which has a few milliseconds of, decay and recovery to 20 milliseconds of decay on the tail end and microseconds to 0 of attack. It clamps down on the first sample that goes over your threshold that's already attenuated. But clippers are generally 0 release, 0 attack. Like any sample that's over a threshold, it immediately goes down. So you get a distortion effect, a clipping distortion effect, rather than the breathing and natural effect of a limiter or compressor. But two things. One, it blurs the line. I mean, we realize that compressors are just really slow distortion units, with lazy attitude, and clipping distortion does the same thing that a limiter does. It makes your dynamic range disappear and introduces artifacts. So I know there's something to it. I don't have a lot of experience with it, and I guess collectively we all don't. But I'm interested in how people are using it, what the sound does and whether it works, like you said, Ivan. And I think it can work. It's a sound. I mean, we're living in the post L1, the Waves L1 is 20, 30 years old now. It's well established.
Why did you have to say that?
Sounding.
Why did you have to say that?
Sorry. I sat in a room with a piece of hardware that a person had in their studio that had Waves L1 written on the front of it. I was like, how? And that long ago, apologizing for how long ago it was. But it was funny. Like, it was at a time where you might not have a computer powerful enough to run Waves limiters. So here's the hardware.
Dude, I want that hardware.
I think my virus remembers when VNV Nation was young.
Yeah, I think your virus remembers, like, hey guys, I've got this new sound called Hypersaur. No one's used it yet. No, that's a really interesting question, Razzie. And once again, it reminds me that I need to learn more about compressors. I have so much to learn about a compressor, and it's funny. I remember I asked a sound engineer who I really looked up to once, and I said, what's the one piece of gear I should get that's really good? And I thought he was going to say a mixing desk or something, and he went a compressor, a good compressor. So I got an Alesis 3630, which is a piece of rubbish, but you know, it's funny. You can get some great fucking chunk out of that thing. And I will just talk about my latest acquisition, which was free because I'm poor. Thank you, poverty. Is this Yamaha 02096. And I was thinking, because I was lucky enough to get cards already, so I've got 40 tracks running on this thing. This is 2000s technology, and everything is EQ'd and compressed. Everything is running huge reverbs, and it has not went, whoa, overload on my CPU at all. So can somebody tell me why the fuck that is? Like, and I'll run 10 tracks on, and that was you can if you want. I was just being, you know, I'll run. I've got a bitchin' computer that's 10 years old, and every time someone looks at it, they go, "Wow, man, this computer's rocking still," and it just goes, "Nah, CPU usage can't handle it." I'm running 9624 on this desk, but the great thing about this desk, although everybody seems to hate the compression on it, I don't mind. It's a really good example to learn about our clap, for example, our hand clap, and to look at how to shape that clap, not just with EQ, but also with compression. And the compressions have got a really cool thing on it called hold, and so do the gate. And I'm learning how to gate things more better so they don't go at the end, although I do like that. So you put a hold on it. So it defines, you say at this stage at minus 20 dB that the gate's going to close very rapidly because I'm going for that gated snare thing. But I'm going to hold it there for 10 milliseconds just to give everything time to drop, and then it's going to cut. So it has no chance of going. Once again, I fucking love that sound. And Diana, it's so good to see you. And yeah, but I've got to learn about compressors because I've always thought, yeah, I should buy some horrendously expensive compressor, but it's going to be like useless on me because I don't know enough about them. Anybody can jump in now. Rezi, talk to me.
There's a little technique, and this guy Stavro, I don't remember his first name. I read the book, and it's a lot of like kind of poetic interpretations of how to do audio engineering that I think might have drawn some criticism. But one of the things that I took away from it was the how to safe crack a compressor. And his technique was like turn up all the knobs all the way and then turn this one down first to really hear what it's doing. And it works, it's effective. It's more like probing and listening and testing what the compressor will do than how to build a good sound using the compressor. But if you turn the ratio all the way up, turn the sensitivity so that it's all the way at the lowest, it's always engaged, turn the release time as fast as it'll get, and let's assume that auto gain makeup and you've only got those three controls, and then start by changing the attack time. And you'll hear, you know, the sound poke through as you increase the attack time, and you'll get a sense of that whole range of how long the attack time can be. And you bring that one back down and then do the same with the release, and you'll hear, you know, that how that affects it. And then once you've got those two dialed and balanced, then you can do how much of it you're actually dialing in with the sensitivity level, the you know, where in the volume of event it starts doing its business. And it's kind of, you know, it's kind of a way in. And if you do that methodically with all of your compressors, and if they have knobs that match those descriptions, you do sort of like flatten out and unify the playing field of what they all do and what their differences are. It sort of eliminates the interface differences, and you get to hear the sound differences a little bit. Cool technique. I don't like go back to it all the time. Usually just throw some sound in and turn some knobs until it sounds good. But once in a while, going back to doing it that way. Educational, good practice.
Okay, thank you. I want to, we can keep talking about compressors. That was really excellent. I think that was great. That was really good. I want to totally about face, if you guys are okay with this, or face somewhere else, and ask the question, what have you heard recently, an idea, a concept, a song that inspired you? And I don't want to talk too much about the song. I want to talk about the inspiration. So I can rant about this for a little while. I can, I'm, as everybody on my Patreon knows, because I've been bitching about it for so long, I'm having the Bastard Gods, ANGELSPIT'S Bastard Gods was the 11th album. I'm now working on the 12th album. I am 5 tracks through it. And it's really interesting because I'm doing it very differently this time. And wow, this is almost an announcement. Anyway, as the bells chime in the background. And I was talking to my mate Al in Australia the other day, and we were having a good bitch to each other. I've known Al since university, so we've known each other 30 years. Jesus Christ, 33 years. And we were talking about, it's great that me and Al have been, buddies through our 2 musical careers, dare I say that have been very, very different. But when you boil them down, it's been very the same. And we had this great conversation about motivation and how hard it is sometimes to get motivated, and how sometimes you just sit at the screen and you cry. Or if you have to go up the stairs to your studio, you find yourself sitting halfway going, I can't go in there. And it was a really good talk about how to overcome that. And what came out of that conversation is you just have to overcome it. I've mentioned before about how that wall that's stopping you from doing your thing is it's an imaginary wall in your brain. It's imaginary. For me, it is anyway. And what I am trying to do increasingly is imagine a unicorn next to that, or a magical happy dragon or something, and turn the wall into the dragon. So the dragon or the unicorn or the cloud of happy joy, whatever it is, things that don't exist. These things don't exist. So now this non-existent unicorn, instead of it being a non-existent wall that's stopping me from making music, it's a non-existent unicorn. And it's going, cool, let's fucking make music. Stop being a whiny little fuck and make fucking music. Because the unicorn in my mind is kind of really potty-mouthed and will punch you with its hoof, with its rainbow hoof in a minute. Oh, I know, it's pretty fucking hardcore. But anyway, that was a big one, because half the problem with, inspiration and getting inspired is that there's so much shit in the way, but you have to figure out, is that shit actually there? And is it diet and or lack of motivation and or lack of exercise or whatever that's changing it? And winter's coming, and this shit gets bad in winter. In Sydney, you can go out and go for a walk and it's great. And same with LA, but there's a lot of places in the US where you can't do that. Yeah, I know. I'm looking at you guys now. All 3 of you now, actually. But Al was talking about, he just came out and he said, has ANGELSPIT ever done an instrumental album? And I went, we've done a few instrumentals, but never an album. And he goes, oh, there you go. And he said it in a very Australian Al accent, which is, oh, there you go. Like that, like, oh, problem solved. And I went, dude, and it's really interesting that we've been talking about the horror soundtracks and everything else. And like, I've got so many lyrics coming out of me and I'm reading through them going, they hurt too much. Al just said, do an instrumental, do a whole bunch of instrumentals. So, and then he said, have you ever done anything? Because we were talking about the desk. And I think Al used to have an 02R. That's, 5.1, 6.1, 7.1. And he said, have you ever done anything 5.1? I went, does anyone have 5.1 systems? Does anyone have a 5.1 system? No, because you can burn DVDs and you can send them the thing and they'll do it in 5.1. That means to mix it, I need kafuckery and all sorts of stuff that I just don't know if I give a fuck. But the desk is set up for it. But and then we stumbled across another idea, which I'm not going to tell you about. And it was like, that's a surprise. And this atomic reaction went off in my brain. And it wasn't, oh, we just lost Jess. It wasn't just about the what that would sound like, but the process of achieving it. And that just went, oh my God, that is what I've been waiting for, that concept. And if I tell someone, they're going to go, who gives a shit? But for me, it's like, wow, that's amazing. Razzie, I see your hand, jump on it. Ivan, get in contact with Jess and tell her to jump back on.
I'm glad. I thought you were going to ask for a specific song, and you went in the exact same direction that I was thinking I might have had some experience with. Playing live, you know, like I got to hop on stage for 3 minutes a couple weeks ago, last week now, and it brought me back to some sense of purpose and how meaningful it is to get out there and do that, and what kind of different energy it brings. And it broke the seal. Like somebody just putting out a hand and bringing you up on stage in a figurative way. And this was Selmod Bond's project, playing with Daniel Meyer's DS Dister project. So it was a good show, and the room was awesome, and I felt good, and I practiced and did the things, and still felt like I was out of shape to do such a thing, and it requires doing it repeatedly to get there. And all those things together really like solidified that, yeah, I'm gonna get back to work doing this. I'm like learning my repertoire tight, you know, knowing what songs are going to be in my set and what I'm going to do, and really planning on you know, making a habit out of it.